Welcome back to another Mech Deck Tech. Today we have another custom build for you straight out of Aetherdrift featuring Loot the Pathfinder. So Loot the Pathfinder is a 5-cost teamer commander with 3 unique exhaust abilities. They're also a double striking vigilance hasty 2/4, so have a lot of things going for them. Let's go over those exhaust abilities real quick, right? Pay a green, tap them down, float 3 mana of 1 color. Pretty good, right? That's decent ramp, I'll take it. Pay a blue, tap them down, draw 3 cards. That card draw is phenomenal. Lastly, pay a red, tap them down, and bolt something. 3 damage, right? It's going to get rid of a fair number of, utility creatures off the board for you. That could be 3 damage to the face, kind of whatever you need it to be. Now, exhaust abilities, as we all know, can only be used 1 time in the entire game. And that's big sad for us, right? We're not here to draw 3 cards once. We're not here to deal 3 damage once. Or even float 3 mana once. We're here to do it all the time. Basically every turn. So how are we accomplishing this? Well, through the use of one of Magic's totally not broken mechanics, flickering, right? We're here to exile Loot, have him come back, and be like, what exhaust abilities? I haven't used any of those. You sound like a crazy person. So let's dive on in to Loot's flickering, right? We're starting off strong with the Deadeye Navigator. So Deadeye Navigator is a 6-cost 5/5 with Soul Bond. So he's going to bond with a creature whenever he enters or whenever an unpaired creature enters and his partner is gone. So that gives them both the ability to pay 1 and a blue and just flicker away for a moment. So super strong, good way of us, being able to repeatedly abuse Loot. Displacer Kitten. So Displacer Kitten is a fan favorite. It's a 2/2 for 4. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you get to flicker a thing. So it is important to note that you kind of don't want to target Loot with the flicker effect from both, because one of them will fizzle. But we do have other exhaust creatures in the deck, so plenty of targets for these flickers. I think we're gonna be okay with it. This next one is not so much a flicker effect as it is a flicker payoff, though it does have the ability to bounce things back to your hand, allowing you to recast them. So not quite flicker, but flicker adjacent. A little bit less efficient, but still pretty good, and that's the Dowerport Mage. So this is a 1/3 for 2, so not bad stats for the cost. Whenever 1 or more creatures leave your battlefield without dying, you get a little bit of card draw. So with the amount of flicker we have in this deck, I think we're going to have a ton of card draw happening. You can also pay 2 and tap them, that being 1 and a blue, to bounce a creature from field to hand. So you could use this, like I said before, as a kind of pseudo-flicker that's way more expensive. But you could also just use it as a nice way of being like, oh, they're about to wipe my board. Let me get my key piece back up into my hand. Lily Splash Mentor. So this is actually from Bloomborough. They're a 4-cost 4/4 with Reach. So pretty good stats. For 3 mana, no tapping required, you get to flicker a creature. It comes back in with a +1/+1 counter. Now, you could only do this at sorcery speed, but I'm pretty okay with that. Minotaur Swift Saviors. This is a 3/3 flyer for 4. This is out of the Lord of the Rings set. Super cheap to pick up. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you get to flicker one of your creatures. And you guessed it, we're almost always going to target Loot, especially after he's already attacked and dealt some damage himself. So I think there's a ton of value there. Last of our creature-based flicker is Thassa Deep Dwelling. So Thassa does break the bank a little bit. Usually for these deck guides, I try and keep things under $10. There are a handful of cards in this that kind of break that rule. That being said, I think that you could cut them if you really were trying to stick to a budget. And just probably put in another, untapper, maybe some more ramp or card draw, really whatever you felt you needed. But I really wanted to maximize the flicker that we had in this deck to really abuse Loot. But Thassa, I'm over here rambling. So Thassa is a 6/5 for 4, already good stats. They're indestructible. We love that. They are not a creature as long as your devotion to blue is low, right? We need to hit at least a devotion of 5, but regardless of whether or not they're a creature or just an enchantment, they do let you flicker a creature at your end step, so again, loot being a prime target. We do have one sorcery speed flicker to include, and that is the Splash Portal. This is also out of Bloom Burrow, but for a single blue mana, you get to go ahead and flicker a creature. If that creature happened to be a bird, frog, otter, or rat, you get to draw a card. They're not going to be in this case, but flicker a creature for single mana is always good. Moving down into our instants, right? We could use these offensively or defensively, depending on the board state. We love that. For 3, we have Blur. So we're going to flicker a creature and draw a card. I'm pretty okay with the cost. It's not ideal, but at instant speed and giving us a card on top of the flicker effect itself, I think it's pretty well priced. Displace follows that up, so it's the same cost in terms of mana, right? So it's 2 and a blue. We do get to flicker 2 things instead of 1 with no card draw tacked onto it. So, like I said earlier, we have some extra exhaust things in this deck. So being able to repeatedly kind of abuse those as well, makes it worth it to me. Essence Flux. So Essence Flux is phenomenal, right? Single blue, we're going to flicker a creature. If it happened to be a spirit, it'll come back with a counter. We don't run any spirits in this deck, but, I feel like holding up a single source of blue mana is pretty easy in this deck. So I'm happy with it. As I am with Ghostly Flicker. So Ghostly Flicker lets you exile artifacts, creatures, lands. You get to choose 2 of them, flicker them real quick. Planar Incision follows up the Ghostly Flicker. So 2 mana lets you exile a thing. It is going to come back with a +1/+1 counter. Because loot is hasty and vigilant, right? Going from a 2/5, 2/4? What's loot? 2/4, that's what I thought. To a 3/5 double striker, does make a difference here. The last of our instant-based flicker effects is Teferi's Time Twist. So 2 mana, flicker a creature. They do come back at end step as opposed to immediately. So there are pros and cons to that, obviously, right? If someone's doing a board wipe, Teferi's Time Twist is great, right? Loot will pop off into exile. The board wipe will resolve, and then the delay trigger will have him come back at the end step. So definitely one that is here to be used more defensively. As a bonus, he does come back with a +1/+1 counter from this as well. Moving down into artifacts, we do have a few flicker abilities here. Starting off with the Conjurer's Closet. So Conjurer's Closet is 5 mana. We'll flicker one of your creatures at your end step. So, like I said before, we have a bunch of exhaust abilities. We have a handful of ETB abilities as well to really kind of take advantage of this, as well as the Sword of Hearth and Home. So Sword of Hearth and Home is a 3 mana, 2 cost to equip. Makes them a little bigger, right? So +2/+2 on a double striker kind of goes a long way. It's effectively a +4/+2 in that sense. And when they deal combat damage, you do get to go grab a land, right? Which is always nice. A little bit of ramp, as well as flicker our boy. Dropping down into our enchantments, we really only have the one, and that's Gossip's Talent. So Gossip's Talent is phenomenal, right? So 2 mana, enchantment class. Immediately, whenever a creature enters, we're going to surveil 1. Right? A little bit of deck selection, a little bit of card selection here. Oh, I don't need this in this moment. I could kind of bin it. There's value to be had there. Leveling it up only costs 1 in a blue, right? So at this point, we've invested 4 mana, possibly over 2 separate turns, possibly in 1 turn. Really depends on the situation and how much mana we have lying around. But whenever you attack, target attacking creature with power 3 or less cannot be blocked. Guess what? Loot has less than 3 power. Even whenever he enters with those +1/+1 counters from any of the various flicker effects that kind of give him 1, he's still only at 3. And 6 commander damage in a single turn. Although it's not like, oh my goodness, you one-shot that guy. You know, all it takes is 4 turns. And obviously, like, depending on the speed of your pod, 4 turns is a lot. But, you know, I think that, like, there's still value to be had there. And then finally, for an additional 4 mana, so right, 8 mana in total, though we do have the extra effects, you know, from the first 2 stages. Whenever a creature we control deals combat damage, we get to flicker them. So, stage 1, or level 1 rather, is fine, right? Good card selection value. Levels 2 and 3 work together in tandem with loot to just say, hey, go wild, you know? Let me see you just completely dominate this field with your various exhaust abilities. So, kind of tangentially related to these flicker abilities, we are running a couple clone abilities. And we're going to start off with Quantum Misalignment. So this is out of the Doctor Who set. I don't know if it's been printed in any other sets. But 5 mana lets you create a token copy of a creature you control, only the token copy is not legendary. So we're not going to be messed up by the legendary rule, which is a very vital piece, you know, when you're talking about cloning your commander. It also has Rebound, right, which is nice. So if you cast it from your hand, you exile it, and then you get to cast it for free the next turn. In a very similar vein, we have Irenicus's Vile Duplication. So 4 mana, so a little bit less. Creates a token copy, except the token is a flyer and not legendary if the original creature is legendary. No rebound, but the flying is nice. And the final clone that we kind of are rocking in this deck is Spark Double. So a 0/0 for 4, comes with a +1/+1 counter, as a copy of a creature, only it's not legendary. So just a ton of value there. Now let's talk about untapping our boy, right? We are flickering him a ton, which means that we're resetting his abilities every turn, but why activate 1 exhaust ability when you could activate 2 or 3 of them, right? I'm gonna butcher this name. It's another Lord of the Rings name. I'm not great with them. Ioreth of the Healing House. So this is a 1/4 cleric for 3. You can tap them down to untap a creature, or tap them down to untap 2 legendary creatures. So a number of the exhaust creatures within the deck are definitely legendary, so there's value to be had there. But even if we were only untapping 1 creature, it could always still just be loot, and we'll get value out of it that way. Sticking with the untapping theme, we have Kiora's Follower. So Simic gets us a 2/2, which could tap down to untap a creature for us. Seedborn Muse follows those guys up. This is a 2/4 for 5 mana. They're going to untap all of our non-lands at the end of each turn, or the beginning of upkeep for each turn, rather. So, definitely a strong contender for, hey, check it out, we're untapping your boys, and you're going to have a good time with it. 1,000-Year Elixir lets us activate our abilities as if, you know, our creatures were hasty. Loot already is, but that's kind of not the point. We do have some others that might want to be able to immediately untap. And for 1 tapping it down, we do get to untap a target creature. And the last is Unstoppable Plan. This is straight out of Aether Drift. 3 mana, beginning of your end step, you get to untap all non-land permanents you control. Now, I mentioned earlier, we actually have a fair number of exhaust abilities in this deck, so let's go over the various exhaust abilities and the support we have built in for them. Boom Scholar. So Boom Scholar is a 3/3 for 3. He reduces the exhaust abilities of other permanents you control by 2. His exhaust ability does cost 6, which is a little expensive. But creatures and vehicles you control gain trample, and he gets a little bigger for the turn. He gets bigger permanently through counters. They all have trample for the turn. Draconautics Engineer. So Draconautics Engineer is a 2/2 for 2, so alright value, not bad, not bad. For 1 red, you could exhaust him to have other creatures you control gain haste, and he gets a little counter on him. For 4 mana, Maybe only 2 if we have our Boom Scholar out, right? We have to create a 4/4 Flying Dragon. So a little bit of value there. Not a ton, but I think that, like, having extra exhaust abilities in case we're having trouble keeping loot out for one reason or another makes it so the flicker effects we have built into the deck really can still shine. Elvish Refueler. So Elvish Refueler is a 3-cost 2/3. During your turn, as long as you haven't activated an exhaust ability this turn, you can activate exhaust abilities as though you haven't activated them. So basically, even if we've already activated all of our exhausts, we're able to at least use 1 exhaust ability each turn, as if we hadn't. So there's value there, right? It's basically an extra kind of pseudo flicker. We're getting around the fact that we've already done this sort of effect. So I think there's a ton of value to be had there. Marvin, Murderous Mimic. So Marvin is a 2/2 for 2 out of Duskmourn. He has all of the activated abilities of creatures you control that don't have the same name as him. And guess what? All of these exhaust abilities are activated abilities. So we're basically doubling up on all of them, and there's a good time to be had there. Pit Automaton. Pit Automaton, there we go. Is a 0/4 defender for 2 mana. We can tap them down to add 2 colorless mana to our pool, which we can only spend on activated abilities. And we could pay 2 into it and tap it down to be like, hey, the next exhaust ability I activate, I want it a second time. Right? We're going to copy that effect. Redshift, Rocketeer, Chief. 2/3 for 2, pretty good. They're vigilant. We like this. We could tap them down to add X mana to our pool, where X is their power, and we can only spend that on activated abilities. They also do have a very expensive exhaust ability at 12 mana that lets us just spit our whole hand out onto the field. Really here for the first ability, less so for the second one, but they're both good. Seta Varma, Masked Racer. This is a 2/3 with a, again, kind of expensive exhaust mechanic. So, X, 2 green, 1 blue, put X 1/1 counters onto them, and then each of our other creatures have base power and toughness equal to Seta's power until the end of the turn. Last of our exhaust creatures is Sky Serpent Seeker, a 1/1 for Simic with flying and death touch. You could exhaust them to reveal the top cards of your library until you reveal 2 lands. Those get put onto the battlefield tapped. And then, the Sky Serpent gets a little bigger. I said we were done with exhaust abilities, but that's not entirely true. We were done with exhaust abilities on creatures. We do have a couple of vehicles that also have exhaust. Starting off with the Boommobile. So a 5/5 vehicle for 4, 2 and 2 red. Whenever this vehicle enters, you get to add 4 mana. You can only spend that mana on activated abilities. We're seeing a theme here, but that's okay. These exhaust abilities can be expensive. Now, they have an exhaust ability themselves, right? X, 2 generic, and a red. Let you put X counters on it, and now it is just a creature. Not until end of turn, it just is. The Boommobile basically comes to life. Could normally be crewed for 2. And with our flicker abilities, we could kind of chain our way through things. This next card isn't an exhaust ability, but Illusionist Bracers does allow you to pay 2 for the equipment, 3 to equip it onto a creature. Whenever you activate an activated ability that's not a mana ability, you do get to copy it and choose new targets for those copies. Rangers, Aether Hive. This is another vehicle. It doesn't have an exhaust ability itself, but it does reward us for activating exhaust abilities. This is a 3/5 crew 1, so very easy for us to crew. Whenever we activate an exhaust ability, we get to create a little Thopter. And I feel like the incidental damage from playing flyers in Commander will add up over time. And even if the Thopters aren't like a battle squad running out to attack other people, having flying blockers is super valuable, in my opinion. Rangers Refueler. This is a 3/3 vehicle for 2. It is a crew 2 situation. Whenever you activate an exhaust ability, you do get to draw a card, so a little bit of extra card draw stapled on top of it. And for 4, we could exhaust it, give it a counter, and be like, hey, guess what? You are, in fact, also a creature. Finally, we have the Rocketeer Boost Buggy. So Rocketeer Boost Buggy is a 3/2 for Gruul. Whenever it attacks, you get to create a treasure token, so we'll get a little bit of ramp. And for 3, very much like the other ones, right, you're going to put a counter on it, and bam, it's now just permanently a creature. But guys, that is the deck overall. You know, there are obviously ramp packages in here. There are other things that you could flicker outside of exhaust and get some value out of. But it's not something I'm overly concerned with going over. If you do want to check out the full deck list, as always, there is a link in the description down below. And also, as always, these episodes are brought to you by Arcane Fortress, makers of fine TCG accessories including deck boxes, sleeves, binders, playmats, and more. There's a link in the description that will save you 5% off any purchase and help out to support the channel with a little bit of kickback. Now, of course, I never need you to spend money to support me. You could just go ahead and like, comment, subscribe, make sure you're watching our videos as they come out, share them with your friends, leave playlists of them running in the background, whatever you need to do. But guys, I am Mechanized Minion, the Energy King, wishing you good luck with your builds.